Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is the second video in my video series on debugging. And in this video, we're going to go through so many of the other functions that are part of the console object that's used for debugging. Okay, now in this case, in the last video, we were looking at add nums and we're doing console logs. But when you're doing a lot of console logs, another way I could have done this. So if I'm doing a lot of console logs at a lot of different points, okay. What I could do is I could do what's called console dot group, and we'll just say, and I'll call you give it a label. So I'm gonna give it add nums, and what it's gonna do is that any console log within this, between this and group end. So at the end, I'll do console dot group end. Well, I should do that before the return, because again, anything after the return will never run. Once the function returns a value, it's done. Console dot group end, and then you have to make sure it has the same label, so that way it's closing that group. So now if I do a console log of sum, console dot log sum, and console dot log div, okay, then I'll kind of label them so I can see that they belong to that function. And I can do that in all my functions, so that way when I see a bunch of console logs on the screen, I know, okay, these belong to this function, these belong to that function, because they all have the right labels as I debug stuff. So you see here it says, hey, add nums. That was the group. I had this console log, and again, this is outside of the group, so that's this console log here. Okay, so group end, group, and group end. And again, you need to put in a label, because if you put a blank, then it's just one sort of global group. Now, it's not always about logging though. Sometimes you're just logging because you're just trying to see if the code ran. Okay, sometimes you have an error and the function doesn't finish. You just don't know where in the function the code is stalling. So another good way to do this is to use console.count, because I don't really need to figure out what the output is. I just need to see where does my code stop moving forward. So I'll do console.count, okay, and then again I'll use a label. So we'll say add nums again. Okay. And then basically what it does is anytime I use the same label, it just adds one to that count. Okay. So it'll be like 1. So I can see, if I see 1, I know the function started. If I don't even see 1, that means the function didn't even start. So let's say I did this, like I did a typo of add num. Save. See here I get a function, add num is not defined. So then I know, okay, maybe I have to take a look at the function name. So again, your errors will tell you a lot of times what you need to do. So add num is not defined. But what if I did have an add num function? Const add num, okay, equals, and this will just return the number 2. So it'll be just a real simple function. Okay, and so now when I run the code, see, it returns 2. It's actually working, but where are all my other console logs? Okay, so in that case, since I don't see my other console logs, they're not running, which means something must be going wrong. So that's a signal. So then I can look at it and be like, oh, I'm running the wrong function. I hit add nums, and then I go back, run it again, and see, I can see the count, the first log. So I know that we got in the function. I see the second one, so that means the const sum1 num1 plus 2 ran. And I see const number 3, so I know that this command ran, because if this didn't successfully run, it would have never got to this line in the code. So if I'm just trying to make sure that, hey, where in this code are we getting stuck, I may just want to do a count after each line, and then take a look at where it stops counting. Okay, to kind of figure out where are we hitting the roadblock, and then working my way from there. Okay, so count is pretty useful. Okay, let's say this function is supposed to return an even number. Let's say like, okay, it's supposed to run an even number. If not, there's a problem. Okay, so then I can do something like this. Console.assert. And what assert does is that you are going to put a test, some sort of Boolean expression, If the Boolean expression is true, then everything's good and the code just moves forward. If not, then it throws an error. Okay, so first we put a Boolean expression. So we're going to say, oh no, I deleted all the code. I just realized. Control Z. There we go. I just want to get rid of the counts. So I just want to make sure that this returns an even number. So we'll do console.assert. And I'll say, hey, if div modulus 2 does not equals 0. So that would be an even number. Okay? Because again, a number that's evenly divisible by 2 should have a 0 modulus. So that's my first argument, the Boolean expression. Now if that returns false, then an error message pops up. Not an even number. Save. Okay, so 2 by 2, this should return an even number, so my code should just run fine. So you just get return 2. Oh, I gotta take have the add nums back in. Save. Save. So it returns 2, but what if I change this to 2 plus 3? Let's run the math. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And then it's 5 divided by 2, which would be 2.5. That's not going to work out to be an even number. So let's run this. And see, assertion failed, not an even number. So then I know something went wrong with the calculation. I can go back. So what I can do is put assertions, these asserts, throughout my function to see if something did work the way it's supposed to. Like check, like it could be something like, hey, I'm supposed to get a number. So like div, maybe div must be instance of number. Well, actually, I can't do that. It's not an object. No, let's say div is instance of array. You know, if you're trying to test that the end result is an array or something is an array, I could do that and then be like, oh, sorry, this thing is not an array. So that's what assert does. And you can just test different lines of code, make sure each line is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then you'll get, you know, the right assertion message if it's not. Now, what if you just decide to make your own test? So like instead of using assert and creating the expression in assert, I just do something like this. Like if div modulus 2 does not equal 0. So if that's true, then I want to throw an error. So I'll put it in an if statement, and then I can use just console.error. And this just allows me to throw an error message. Not an even number. Save console.error. See, not an even, and then I see the message pop up in there. But then again, if I change this back to 2 and 2, which should be an even number, return 2. Although, again, that's not all that. Where that becomes more useful is in the browser, because when you use console.error, it'll actually be like red. It'll actually have like a different color versus just a normal console log, which is nice. Like here in the normal terminal node, there's not much of a color differentiation, so I might as well just use console log. Cool. Okay, we got a few more. And I could also just use console warn. Again, there's two possibilities. There's warnings and there's errors. And for someone who's using your code, so again, this is not always because you're debugging your code. This might be errors and warnings you're putting in your code for someone else to use to make sure that if they use your code wrong, you're giving them information. You're giving them warnings and errors so that they can use your code better. Okay? So a warning would just mean, hey, you didn't break it, but this is not the way I recommend you do it. You should be doing it this way. And just warn, you know, if you keep going down this road, you might start hitting errors. So warnings are always like not errors. They're not. It's not something's broken. It's just that you're not doing something quite right, and there's something you should be concerned about. Okay, so if it would be the same thing. Again, in here, let me change this back to 3, so we get the warning message. And so you get the warning message. And again, in the browser, you'll see different colors, and it'll be a little bit more informative and more of a difference. Okay. Now another thing is that you may be working with like complicated data. So let's see here. Let's make an object. Const object name Alex Merced. Why is that complaining? Oh, I see why. Const my obj equals, there we go. And then age 34. Save. What you can do, especially if you're getting like huge objects or huge arrays of objects, a neat thing to do is to do like console.table. Not sure how this is going to work in Node, but if you're doing it in the browser, it looks pretty nice. Console.table, my obj. Okay. It also depends sort of what browser, how it'll appear and whatnot, but what this does is it'll actually show you the information in sort of a table format. So see, there you go. See, it says name Alex Merced, age 34. And that's just sort of sometimes a nice way to examine the information you're getting to make sure that all the values you think are there. So if you're sort of wondering what the state of a particular object or array is, you can use console.table just to kind of, make it look nicer. And then the last one is if you wanted to like time something. So I can do something like console.time. Then I can give it a label, test. Then what I'll do is I'll just do a bunch of different commands. Command console.log, hello, and I'm just going to do this a whole bunch of times. Okay, so if I really am curious of how long will it take to do this, console.time end, and then I put in the same label, test. And what this will do is it'll start the timer, run the code, and then once we hit this time end, it'll then console log the time it took to get there from the beginning, from the first. And then see, it took 31 milliseconds. Okay, from the first console.time to the console.time end. And then console logged all these hellos. So those are some tools you have in console as far as how to debug. Again, things like setting up your own errors and assertions, or assertions are going to be really useful because setting up assertions attest that each line of your code is doing what it's supposed to be doing. By creating some sort of expression to check it out, be like, hey, is this? Is this an array? Is this an object? Is this even? Is this odd? Is this a prime number? Just putting in all your checks and then having it give you a message so that way you know where things broke can be really useful. Okay. And the thing is that you don't necessarily have to go back and then clean out all those assertions. Like console logs, you don't want to leave those in there because then what happens, the user won't necessarily always see it, depending on if it's back-end code or front-end code. But if it's front-end code, they will see it. They're going to see a bunch of console logs in their, if they brought up their developer tools in their browser, and that's not necessarily the best look. But again, assertions are only going to run if something breaks, so it's a little bit nicer because they're only going to show up when they really need to show up. And there's sometimes whole libraries just built around that whole premise, like Jest, Cypress are sort of the bigger testing libraries. There's a few other ones that are escaping me at the moment. Let's see here, Jest, Cypress, there's another bigger one. But you guys get the idea. So I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll talk about try and catch blocks.